So today I'm going to be doing one of my favorite episode in the Moving Forward series and probably the longest episode of the Moving Forward series. And that of course is doing the Moving Forward series of one of my favorite teams, the San Jose Earthquakes, also known as my local team. And you notice I am actually wearing a throwback San Jose Clash jersey here because, back when the Clash came into the league alongside with the original 10 members of MLS that basically started the league in 1996, they made it to the playoffs in the inaugural season, and people thought that maybe this team was going to be a regular playoff contender. No. They end up missing the playoffs their next 5 seasons, and they actually didn't make it to the playoffs until they were rebranded as the San Jose Earthquakes in 2001, and we know what happened that year with the Quakes going all the way to MLS Cup and eventually winning their first ever MLS Cup in franchise history. And coming into this season, I know there was a lot of optimism that, after last year's playoff run, and even though it kind of ended in disappointment in that game against Sporting KC, at least that game when they were playing against Sporting KC was probably the best and probably the most proudest I have with a Quakes team that comes out in a defeat. And I thought, coming into this year, well, I wouldn't say I thought. I think many people thought that this team can maybe carry that momentum heading into next season, and they're going to be making the playoffs again. And also, the reason why I didn't say I thought is because coming into this year, I also kind of took the opposite route, and the fact that I just had a feeling the Quakes are going to let their fans down again. I mean, I've seen this before where, it's kind of false hope with this team, and the fact that, they're going to once again disappoint their fans with a disappointing season. And there you have it. It's another disappointing year for this team that kind of took a step back once again, missing the playoffs and finished 10th in the Western Conference. And while they, of course, were in it for a while, and there was some chances that they, of course, make it to the playoffs so they can win some crucial game down the stretch, in classic Quakes fashion, they lose those games. But we'll definitely get to talk about that once we talk about the what went wrong part with this team. But first of all, in terms of this season itself, they finished with a 10, 11, and 13 record and finished with 41 points. They scored 46 goals this season and gave up 54th goal, and even though it is one of the worst defensive record in MLS, I think that is kind of considered a miracle. The fact that this team actually finished with just giving up 54 goals, and that, if you ignore what happened in the first half of the season where they were literally the worst defensive team in the league, and it wasn't even close with, well, I wouldn't say they were the worst defensive team in the league, because I think I've almost forgot that there's a couple of teams in the East that is named FC Cincinnati, and Toronto FC was pretty bad in terms of their defense. But at least in the Western Conference itself, they were by far the worst defensive team by a country mile, and it looked like this team was going to give up like 70 plus goals this season. But in the midway part of the season, they did try to reinforce their defense and getting a Brazilian defender in Nathan that I really think he stabilized that back line. And not to mention the fact that Tanner Beeson, a guy that I kind of ridiculed before of the fact that he wasn't good enough to be in the league. Wow. I mean, this season he has definitely proven me wrong, and the fact that he's definitely taking that next step, that he could be a legit good MLS defender in this league. But nevertheless, they did finish with a negative goal differential with -8. I mean, it feels like every single season the Quakes finish with a negative goal differential. Like, I don't remember the last time the Quakes actually finished with a positive goal differential. I mean, I don't think they finished with a positive goal differential even when they make the playoffs last season, and they especially did not finish in a positive goal differential in 2017. In fact, they actually, I think that year when they make it to the playoffs, it was the worst goal differential that any team made it to the playoffs, with a -22 goal differential. And of course, they finished 10th in the Western Conference this season. Now, top goal scored for this team, well, unsurprisingly, Chofis leads the team with 12 goals. I mean, Chofis is pretty much one of the signing that I think he's definitely kind of proved me wrong with the way that, coming into this year, I was a bit skeptical that Chofis could be a decent player on this team, and there's times where in the first half of the season he kind of almost proved me right with the way that he just didn't look like he really fit well in this league. But in the second half of the season, that's when he had his coming out party. I mean, there was a stretch where he was basically carrying this Quakes attack, and I will never forget that hat trick that he scored against RSL, and also we'll never forget the fact that the team let Chofis down because even though Chofis scored a hat trick in that game, the team gave up four goals, and that's just one of those rare moments where you have a player score a hat trick and yet you still end up on the losing side. But what a season Chofis has had, and now there's kind of it's going to be interesting to see what the Quakes are going to do. I mean, I know the Quakes have already extended his loan until June of next season, but if he's going to have another incredible start to the second half of the season, why not buy him? Like, he looked like he is the real deal, and he is the number 10 that the Quakes are desperately needing. Well, actually, I wouldn't say he's that number 10 that the Quakes desperately needed, because he actually have scored more goals than the amount that he has assists. But if you can have a number 10 that can be a pure goal scorer, that would be just as fine as a number 10 that can be that playmaker and basically pull the string on the attack. And then you got K Cal, of course, finished with 5 goals. I mean, K Cal definitely got a lot of hype in the beginning of the season, and there's no doubt that hype kind of died down as the season goes along, though I will say that he's still relatively young. I mean, people forget that he's only 17 years old, and that, you are a 17-year-old kid, and the way that he's break down into this league, I'll just give him the benefit of the doubt, even though he kind of faded away a little bit in the second half of the season. And then at number 3, you got Wondo, who, even though this year in his farewell tour he did not score double-digit goal, at least he scored 5 goals this season, and most importantly, scoring the last goal that the Quakes had this season, and that last goal against FC Dallas. I think that's just a great symbolic ending of the fact that, Wondo, in his very final game, he of course has to score one more time to add his historic career of scoring 172 goals and being the all-time goal scoring king. And yeah, I mean, of course we'll talk a little bit more about Wondo once we get to this part of the board. And then you got Benji Kikanovich, who I thought he was actually decent, and he definitely is a guy that I think he has a future of this team, especially an impact sub coming off the bench with 4 goals this season. And then Christian Espinoza finished the top 5 with 3 goals for the Quakes. Top assist leader, Espinoza, of course, unsurprisingly leads the team, though he only had 8 assists this season, which, 8 assists is not bad in MLS, but if you're a player that basically earns the most on your team and you are considered a designated player, yeah, I think 8 assists is kind of underwhelming. And I really think Espinoza this season, he really regressed in a way where there was time where he actually was benched because of how bad his form has been. But nevertheless, let's just hope that he can, of course, recover his form, because, let's hope that Espinoza, who really showed some promise in his first 2 season with the Quakes. I mean, there was time where I thought the Quakes finally found that deep P player that can be that creative player that they've been desperately looking for a long time. And Espinoza this season, even though he eventually did finish as top assist leader, you would expect he should have done much more, consider the fact that he's a DP player and he earns the most on this team. Then you got K Cal with 6 assists, followed by Chofis with 4 assists. Then you got Lucho Abicassi with 3 assists, and then rounds out the top 5, you got Marcos Lopez with 3 assists. So, what went right with this team? Well, the first thing that went right for this team is they got themselves back into playoff contention with that 10-game unbeaten run, which is one of the longest unbeaten run that the Quakes has had. And yeah, I mean, this team, I will say that in the first half of the season, they looked like they were dead and buried. And if it wasn't for that 10-game unbeaten run, this team would not have got themselves back into playoff contention. And the fact that I feel like, that 10-game unbeaten streak kind of also symbolized the roller coaster ride that Almeida team has. And I always talk about how you always get the Almeida experience, where there's going to be times where you're going to be in rock bottom, but once you get a streak going, yeah, you're going to definitely ride high on the roller coaster. But that also means that when you ride high in the roller coaster, you always will find a way to go down. And that's also where I talk about how before I was kind of concerned with the way that, and the other thing that was also concerning with that 10-game unbeaten streak is that they had a lot of draws in that 10-game unbeaten streak. And getting draws is not bad in the league, especially on the road, where you want to get points on the road, and you of course get wins at home. But the problem is the Quakes were not doing that unbeaten run. Like, they were drawing a lot of games home, and away. And when that happens, that just does not help your cause in terms of getting yourself up in the table and help you in the point total too. So yeah, in some way that you can also maybe put an asterisk with the way that, yes, they went on an incredible unbeaten run, but they also draw a lot of games, and some of those games were very frustrating draws. The defense, of course, was much stable as we get into the latter part of the season. As I mentioned, a lot of that has to do with Nathan coming into this team, really stabilized that back line, and then also the emergence of Tanner Beeson that definitely stepped up this season to be an excellent defender for this team. And then, of course, the last thing went right for the Quakes is that at least Wondo got his proper send-off. Yes, I know technically he didn't get the send-off in a way where, you know, it's him lifting the MLS Cup, or the fact that he get his proper send-off with a win against FC Dallas on decision day. But at least in some way, I think it was kind of better with the way that, I mean, you know, getting him an MLS Cup and seeing him raising that trophy as he rides out the sunset, that obviously is the perfect send off. But you know, I think the next best send off for Wondo is with the way that it's the last regular season and the Quakes have nothing to play for, and that, you know, it's also so a full crowd at PayPal Park, which that was kind of the thing that I think draws Wondo to play one more season, because you knew that last season, even though there was that threat of him retiring for the Quakes, there was no way he was going to do it in an empty stadium. Like, he had to do it in front of a full passionate Quakes fan base, and he definitely got that in that final game, where that final game, even though there was nothing to play for, that was probably the most packed I've seen PayPal Park all season, and for good reason. They knew that was Wondo's last game, and everyone wanted to be part of that history of the greatest goal scored in league history, and definitely the greatest player ever played for this franchise history. So what went wrong for the Quakes this season? Well, one of the big thing that went wrong is inconsistency. And in some way, if you look at the first 2/3 of the season, it was inconsistency with the way that they started off terribly in the beginning of the season, dig themselves in a hole, and they eventually got themselves back into playoff contention, even got themselves above the playoff line with about a third of the season goes. And then with the last third of the season, it just felt like it was too inconsistent. Like, there was time where they did get some wins during that stretch, but they were not getting wins against games that they had to win. Like, I even said that during that stretch as we were heading into September, that, you know, even though the Quakes were kind of on the outside looking in, or, well, I wouldn't say that they were on the outside looking in. They were actually on the bubble in terms of making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. I did think that the schedule down the stretch, they had a lot of favorable game, and especially against teams that are going to be their biggest rival in terms of making the playoffs. And the fact that, you know, in most of those games, they weren't able to get those crucial wins, that was the backbreaker. Like, that's just, you know, if you can't get wins against teams that you're fighting for those precious playoff positions, you're not going to make it to the playoffs. And again, like I said, they just couldn't do it, even though they did get some wins doing that stretch. I mean, they didn't really just kind of completely collapse like what we saw in 2019, where, you know, I remember in 2019 they were as high as second place, and they were a short horseshoe into the playoffs, and then they went on that 6-game losing streak that pretty much crashed them out of the playoffs, and that was probably one of the biggest collapse we've seen in the league since that collapse that we saw with FC Dallas back in 2017. The goals, of course, were hard to come by for this team, and especially during the second half of the season, where, you know, don't let the amount of goals that the Quakes score, which 46 goals is not too bad. I mean, it's right around the middle of the league in terms of goal score, but don't let that distract you for the fact that, you know, there were games where it was kind of like feast and famine for this team. I mean, there was I think a couple of games, it was 3 games I know that they scored 4 plus goal, and 2 of those were against Austin FC, and I know they also scored like a combined 7 goals against RSL. So if you add that number together, that's 15 out of the 46 goals was scored in those 4 games alone, which that's what, if I do the math, that's almost like a quarter of the amount of goals that they score. And there's just times where when I see this team, it just feels like the goals were just not there for this team, and a lot of that has to do with the way that Almeida kind of stopped using his man marking system. Like, for the very first time this season, I thought Almeida finally decided to ditch the man marking system, and for the right reason, because it was pretty clear that the man marking system was just not working. I mean, everybody pretty much had figured out that by now, and that Almeida just kind of feel like he wants to be a little bit more pragmatic, and there's nothing wrong of being pragmatic, but the problem is when you're being pragmatic, that means it can sometimes produce some of the most boring game you will see. And there was times where this season it felt like I was watching the Quakes back in 2015, and it looked like it was Dominic Kintner basically coaching this team all over again. We remember how that was really kind of almost the true dark days of the Quakes, of them playing so many negative style of soccer, and just kind of playing a style of soccer that just put any neutral fans to asleep. But I think it was necessary with the way that this team just simply does not have the manpower to play in this man marking system, and also not to mention, as I said, everybody kind of had figured out that man marking system by then. And then the last thing that went wrong is most of Almeida guys kind of flop hard in the league. I mean, besides Chofis, I mean, guys like Carlos Fierro, Andy Rios, and even Lucho Apicassi, they were huge flop in the Almeida system, and they were Almeida's guys. Even Eric Remedi, a guy that, you know, I thought Remedi, he kind of had an okay season. I mean, I don't know, there's some people say that he had a poor season. I don't think so. I think there's time where Remedi really showed up, and he definitely looked like the Remedi that we know from his Atlanta days a couple of years ago. But, you know, there's also time that Remedi looked absolutely terrible, and it's just kind of almost like day and night with him in terms of his performance. So yeah, I think he was okay this season, but nothing spectacular. And yeah, I mean, again, most Almeida guys and guys that Almeida brought in, they've, you know, we thought that coming into the season with Almeida finally has the structure to sign some players that he won, maybe things are going to go well, and it did not. And that, I think, is where maybe there are some fans that kind of started to turn on Almeida. I mean, I know there were some Quakes fans that really want Almeida out, especially in especially doing that bad run in the first half of the season, and even late into the season when they were losing key games. I mean, they feel like maybe Almeida wasn't actually the true savior that he was promised when he was with this team. But nevertheless, you know, a lot of that also has to fall on the fact that his guys just do not perform, and kind of just do not fit in this league with the way how they play. So moving forward for this team, so obviously the biggest question coming into this offseason is the fact that, is Chris Leitch finally going to be the answer? So after Jesse Forinelli, of course, being fired from this team as a GM, Chris Leitch basically stepped it in. He definitely makes some good moves to get this team going once again, and now the fact that he's now going to be the permanent GM, is he going to be the right guy? And I said before that I think he is going to be the right guy. I think he's going to be a guy that definitely is going to do something that we have not seen the Quakes usually do, and that is looking at domestic talent, and hope that maybe sign a couple of players that is within MLS, and make some transfer that is within the league, instead of maybe going down to South America to just find some hidden. Well, I wouldn't actually. That's that's actually not right. What the Quakes usually always do is just bring a bunch of Chivas guys that used to play without Almeida, and maybe also get a couple of European player that nobody, of course, have heard of. And the fact that you know, I said for a long time of the way that this team hasn't really signed a lot of players that is within the league is kind of puzzling, because I've seen there's teams where they try to do that, and they have found some success by doing that way. So I have a feeling Chris Leitch is going to do more of that, especially with the way that he kind of shocked me when he decided to get Jeremy Abobasi from the Portland Timbers. Like, I think if that was still Jesse Forinelli, there was no way Jeremy Abobasi was going to come into the team. But with Chris Leitch, knowing that he started to have this philosophy of trying to get proven MLS talent within the league, which for a long time, that was kind of also what I was really hoping this team to do. Like, why not just find some instead of just finding these hidden gems from these nobody leagues, why not just look within? And there's definitely some decent player that, you know, if you trade the amount of game that the Quakes has had to another team to get that player, you can definitely build a successful team. So that's something that I expect this offseason is going to look like, where there's going to be more signings with it in the league, that the Quakes might make some trade with teams that is within the league and get some proven players on this team. And then, of course, the second thing moving forward is the fact that hopefully money will be spent with this team. Like, I know this has been one of the frustrating thing about the Quakes, and in some way, I guess maybe the front office does have the right to say, well, when you look at the cap space that we have, we don't really have a lot of wiggle room in terms of that. But now heading into this new season, you see a lot of bad contract has finally come off the books. Probably the worst contract that the Quakes had with Andy Rios, and his almost $1 million contract that occupy a lot of the cap space. Well, now that is off, there's no excuse. The fact that this team don't have the money to trying to spend to try to get some good talent within the league, or maybe go down to South America to find those hidden gem. And then the last thing that went moving forward for this team, well, one of the last thing, because I did bring a bonus fact for the moving forward series for the Quakes, is that what is Almeida's future with this team? I mean, I know this offseason I won't be surprised that there's going to be teams in Liga MX or even some national team that is going to be trying to lure Almeida away from the Quakes. And for a long time, I was always fearful that of course is going to be the case, because Almeida, that I think I was trusting the fact that he is going to guide this team to the promised land. But again, when you look at some of the resort that he has had, it hasn't really been anything special. And in some way, I'm almost kind of joining one of those some of those fans within the Quakes fan base, of the fact that I'm kind of almost losing some faith on Almeida, and whether or not if he can, of course, turn things around. But nevertheless, we'll see whether or not if Almeida does continue to commit with this team. I mean, there's times last season I saw on the pitch and near the touchline, he looked like he just want to get out of here as soon as possible. So we'll see whether or not if he is going to stay, and especially with a new GM. Depending on some of the moves that Chris Leitch make, I won't be surprised some of these moves will actually be used with life after Almeida. So it's going to be interesting to see what Almeida's future is going to be, and whether or not if he is going to be with the Quakes next season. And if he is going to be with the Quakes next season, remember, his contract is up next year. So we'll see if this team does go on a bad run. Don't be surprised the team will fire him, knowing the fact that they really have nothing to lose with his contract being at the end of the season. And then last thing, kind of a bonus fact for the Quakes moving forward, is they got to build that Wondo statue as soon as possible. I mean, it's not even a discussion. The fact that Wondo needs to have a statue in front of PayPal Park. I mean, sure, yes, they already kind of did some honor with renaming part of the street outside of PayPal Park, called Wondo Way in recognition of him. But I think the ultimate legendary status is build a statue in front of PayPal Park, and he deserved it. Like, I don't know what else I need to say about Chris Wondolowski that I haven't said of how much he's a legend to this team, and he's going to be a guy that is going to remember for a very long time. And heck, even 50 years down the line, I will definitely tell my kids and my grandchildren about the legend of Chris Wondolowski, because he's a guy that I think the way that he plays and the journey he has, it's something that we might not ever see again, because it was just so unorthodox with him being a late bloomer, and especially with the way that he is also playing in a kind of style that is kind of started to phase out in the game of soccer, of being kind of like that true poacher. That's kind of a player that we might never see it again, and it's great to see how Wondo really did it in the top of his game, and also seeing in a way where he's been staying with this club for a very long time, and especially now with it in the way that I think the record that Wondo currently has, the only guy that I think realistically could potentially break his record is Joseph Martinez, but that also depending on whether or not if Martinez, who already have suffered a torn ACL, whether or not if he's going to be injury free for the rest of the season. And not to mention the fact that this has been a league that has been more of a sailing league, and then when you have players that if they have a breakout year, especially early in their career, it's not going to be a big surprise that they might not even stick around with the league for a very long time before moving to another league. And that is kind of one of the reasons why it's getting rare to see guys that can actually reach even close to Wondo's record. Like, I think the closest guy that was active in terms of reaching that Wondo record was Kai Kamara a couple of years ago. And even though Kai Kamara was kind of catching up Wondo in terms of the all-time goal scoring chart, eventually Kai Kamara kind of doesn't have that legs anymore, and nowadays we don't even know where he's at. He's almost at a point where he pretty much is about to officially announce his career being finished. So yeah, I think his record is definitely going to be withstand for a very long time, and again, it's just an incredible career that Wondo has had, and I can't believe I haven't made a video about him yet. I was going to make that video right after when he retired, but you know, because I've been so busy, I haven't really got a chance to do so. But I promise that I will definitely make that video somewhere down the line this off season. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And of course, if you're a Quakes fan like myself, what do you think went right, went wrong, and moving forward, what do you think this team is going to look heading into next season? And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys hit a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.